data, trust, identity. 4 builders, 4 visions for a smarter digital future.
Quick intro to the company. We founded Data Squared in September of 2020.
Jon Brewton is teaching AI how to reason.
For us, it was about transforming how informations can understand their information.
Like if you understand how the mechanics of it is working, it sort of gets easier, right?
I'm CEO of Cloudfruit and Hybo.
Sam Hilsman created a more structured and pocket-friendly way for students to leverage AI to grow smarter.
We were using ChatGPT a lot. I had a couple problems with it. One was that it would hallucinate a lot.
My background is academic. Got a PhD in theoretical astrophysics.
Dr. Yann Golanski is reshaping companies by setting up systems and processes for tech teams.
Running now my own consultancy with a couple of friends. Together we have over 100 years experience.
There are levels and he's there.
Hey, I'm one of the founders of the company called Dodgeball.
And Schwartz is changing how companies can tackle bad behavior of hackers and scammers by giving a foolproof, most trustable solution.
The goal for us is to save one of our customers 0.5% of gross.
All right, so let's get started, guys. Welcome everybody to the Quint Network podcast. I really appreciate you all taking your time out for this event. We are gathered here so that we can network with each other, develop relationships, and while we are doing all of that, probably teach us some core business skills to some of the audience that we have, right? That is the goal. And with that, all right, so let's get started with the introductions. I'll go according to whom I see on my screen first. So, John, would you like to give us a short buzz? Would you like to introduce yourself and the business, Data Squared?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Jon Brewton. I'm the founder and CEO of Data Squared. Quick intro to the company. We founded Data Squared in September of 2023 with a vision to build a world where people and machines can make smarter decisions together. Our team includes co-founders Chris Rohrbach, who's a former Navy SEAL commander, Eric Costantini, who's a former U.S. Marine Corps veteran, myself, a former U.S. Air Force veteran, and a couple of other guys, our Chief Research Officer, Jeff Dalgleish, and our Chief Technology Officer, Dan Bukowski, who come from the oil and gas industry with me. So I span both of those worlds, both defense and intelligence and oil and gas. And our company kind of came together trying to figure out how we could use new technology and new approaches to solve sort of traditional problems. And one of the more, I think, important things was how do we combine some of this new technology and create new and novel sort of applications and solutions that are not only powerful, but fully transparent and explainable within high reliability industries we operate in. So our flagship product review platform, as far as we understand it, is the only zero trust secured, fully explainable AI system designed to meet high stakes sector needs. We offer complete traceability, auditability, zero hallucinations, and explainability down to the data record level. We ensure every insight from our AI is solely derived from the client's data, providing unmatched reliability and variability, or verifiability. The reason we kind of got started on this is because my background as an engineer, really coupled with my defense background, gave me a little bit of an insight that we're working in these really vast industries with really disconnected systems, disconnected infrastructure, but all of these pieces of information, these pieces of these puzzles are really important together. Aggregating that intelligence is a really manual effort. You're going from siloed systems where like these relationships are not inherent with sort of the structure of these databases, and trying to pull them together and interconnect them in a way that allows you to sort of reason across really different domain sectors, different functional groups, and different data modalities. And so for us, it was about transforming how informations can understand their information. And ultimately, we kind of see ourselves as the missing link here. We're not just storing information, we're connecting dots within your information across boundaries that turn your sort of static database systems into a living knowledge model that we start to reason to and from. And so I think, a couple of things are most significant impacts with clients early were, drowning in data, structured, unstructured, semi-structured, high frequency data, trying to make critical decisions, missing connections. And by deploying sort of this graph-based transparent AI approach, we're able to really help people start to create value from AI solutions, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do. Quite frankly, a lot of people miss the whole value creation part of cool science projects that we deploy to different people. I'd say one of the biggest setbacks that we had early was we over-designed and over-engineered the system for really high-tech people And when trying to deploy it to sort of line workers, which I was at one point in a lot of detail, we just missed the boat there. And so we went back and sort of tried to figure out how we could simplify this system in a way that made it easy for the users to understand and see their data, but equip them with sort of these next level reasoning techniques that could scale across their database systems and infrastructure. So that's our story. That's sort of why we're here, and look forward to chatting with you guys and hearing everything about your companies as well.
That was amazing introduction. I think you pretty much covered everything. It took me 2 days to, by the way, get to that level.
Exactly.
So that okay, guys, here is the revelation, okay? Pre-podcast call, I spoke with John and I'm like, what did he say?
Exactly.
Am I that stupid?
That makes sense.
It does. Just thinking there is so much education required on this tool. Thank you very much, by the way, John. Again, as I mentioned, right, it was definitely a challenge for me to understand the technology. After understanding it, I sort of understood why it's that hard to understand. So, but it's not actually hard, right? Like if you understand how the mechanics of it is working, it sort of gets easier, right? While we are talking about hallucinations, though, I'd love to introduce you guys to Sam. Sam has created Hybo, and I'm so sorry, Sam, I'm not going to steal your thunder, but please do mention the
Hallucination part, yeah.
Yeah, so my name's Sam Hilsman. I'm CEO of Cloudfruit and Hybo. Cloudfruit, it's a 0 to 1 product development agency. We also do a lot of ERPs and integration work. I have a deep background in mostly healthcare integrations, and I've worked pretty much across the board at various hospitals and health organizations in the country. I started Cloudfruit in 2022 because I was just tired of working for other people, really. So I started Cloudfruit. We've done really well, and we decided to bootstrap a product. So we were trying to figure out what to build. It was like late 2023, and we were using ChatGPT a lot, using AI for things. I still use it to this day to help me with building integrations and doing various types of development. It's really good for some detailed work. That said, I had a couple problems with it. One was that it would hallucinate a lot, especially when I would get deep in the weeds with something. And the other was that it would routinely forget who I was. And the third was the context window. The context window it's gotten a lot better, but early on, that context window was a killer because you'd have to start a whole new chat as soon as you reached a certain context window. So we built Hybo. We've pivoted a few times. The original goal of Hybo was to be essentially model context protocol. That's what we started trying to build, with sitting between all of the systems out there in the world and have an API between, our AI and whatever underlying LLMs and then their systems API layer. We quickly realized, we were going to go the new developer route. We were going to try to get a bunch of developers in and do some revenue sharing, and we quickly realized how complicated that would be and how long the runway would be on that and how much money it would take to realistically get that to an MVP level. So we scaled it way back, and Hybo is personal AI now. Personal, affordable, sustainable. Those are kind of our 3 core pillars of what we built. It's essentially to start out as a chat bot. The goal is for it to sit as a memory layer on top of the LLMs. So we're building more and more memory capabilities. When you start with Hybo, the first thing you do is create a personal thread. So you fill out some information about yourself. It's not just about who you are, but also about your communication preferences and about what you're working on, your style, how you like the AI respond, all the things that we ran into issues with where we're constantly having to reprompt and retrain. Create that personal thread, and that follows you around everywhere. So as you're creating new chats, starting a new thread is what we call them, or as you're hydrating your thread, which is where we're essentially sending the context from one conversation to another within the same thread. When you're doing that, you're sending all of that context. So you're sending your personal context plus the context from any previous conversations you've had. The goal here is to create a more fluid experience of chatting with AI. We've got currently 3 LLMs hooked in. We've got DeepSeek, ChatGPT, OpenAI, and Claude Anthropic. We'll continue expanding those. We are releasing, it's our first commercial product through Cloudfruit. And so we are releasing it on June 23rd to the general public. We've also got quickly growing wait list. We've got about 250 people on the wait list right now. We got pretty good buzz. It's cute. It's approachable. It's affordable. Our entry price is $5 a month. So because we're using the AI, we can go a lot cheaper than any of the other tools out there. It's got a really clean front end. I'm a freak about details, as I'm sure all of you are here. And that, for me, that includes user experience design. So I'm heavily focused on that. I can gladly do a quick demo on here if you guys want, or I can do.
Well, yeah, I would love to that.
100%.
Let's go. By the way, a small commentary here. The first time I saw the product, more or less used it as like, I need to talk to John. This is interesting. Personal thing, right? Like the growth hack that
Yeah.
commenting to you, John, taking it, in on a very personal level. Haibo pretty much does it, but with other LLMs, not their own.
So it's in development, so bear with me as I go through this. There's definitely going to be some slight bugginess. The personal thread is the big one that's under development. When you first log in, the first time you ever log in, before you can open any threads in chat, you have to go through that personal thread process so that we can get your base context and understand that. That said, when you do, you create a subject. So I'm in here, I'm chatting. I want to start a new thread. I want to talk about the Quint podcast network and how we can make it super cool. You guys
That is nice.
We're going to select an M up here. I'll use Quad because it just seems to be pretty clean. You'll notice there's a little token indicator everywhere. And in the bottom right corner, that's how many tokens you have left. Our freemium version is going to have 200 tokens a month, so just for free. And then our $5 a month version starts you with 20,000 tokens. These are not the final prices of the actions. It's actually going to be calculated. We just finished doing the math for this. So it's essentially calculated as you go. And we're always telling you that this is an estimated cost. So we're estimating how much it's going to cost. Not exactly that, but we're calculating it in real time. Anyway, I'm going to generate my context. So alongside all of that personal information, this thread context is going to follow this thread. So you've got a global memory that's a lot more robust than anything out there. It knows you, your communication preferences, what you want to talk about, what you want to avoid talking about, how you want it to respond, et cetera, et cetera. And then for each thread, you've got a dedicated memory for that thread. So it'll create my personality, my context, and then this is, I think, what the guys wanted me to mention here. We can set your hallucination tolerance. So how deterministic do you want it to be, or how creative do you want it to be? And we're talking about podcast marketing, such will all make it pretty creative towards the higher end. And so now you're talking with an LLM that has all this context about you.
Okay.
As you go through, blah blah blah. I'm saying stuff, get some ideas or podcast subjects. I don't know. One of the things we're working on is thread chunking so that you start getting a response back and you don't sit there and wait. We're also working on some of the formatting so that it's just a little bit cleaner and easier on the eyes. That said, you'll notice your thread help up here is telling you how much of a context window you have left for this thread. As you go through, this will obviously start getting closer to the red. This thread health number will drop lower and lower. At any point in time, you can hydrate. You can, first of all, you can edit your thread memory. So if I want to change the hallucination tolerance, change the context, if I want to change the name, I can do that. And all of these are sent to the AI. And so if you update this, it's going to basically, in the developer message on the back end, it's going to tell it that this information about you. You can also hydrate your thread. So if I click hydrate, this is going to summarize my conversation up to this point, and it's going to give me a summary. I can read it. I can add more summary inputs if I want. I also talked about how much I love dogs, and it's going to reiterate the summary and add that information in, and then I'm going to hydrate. And so now I'm hydrating my thread. I'm staying in the same thread window, and I'm just going to continue talking about, there's some tweaks that we need to work on here with the prompt management. That's one of the last things that we're working on. But yeah, the idea here is that you hydrate your thread and it's a fluid, ongoing conversation. Now my thread help is back up to 100% and I can keep it moving.
Brilliant.
Likewise, I can also change AIs mid-conversation. So if I decide, I want to switch over to OpenAI, I'm going to need to hydrate my thread because I'm summarizing the conversation. It's going to give me a summary here. I'm going to hydrate. Now I'm talking to OpenAI. Again, some minor tweaks in here, some bugs that still need to be worked out, but that's the general concept. You've got a few other things. You can attach a file. You can do a web search. You can generate an image, kind of all the basic stuff that these AIs do. And yeah, that's pretty much the product as it stands right now. We've got some ideas for where we're headed in the future, but we're really trying to see what the product market fit looks like. And then, be responsive to our early adopters.
Brilliant.
Amazing.
Thank you very much, Sam.
That's great.
Really appreciate it.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So just to let you know, the ICP for Sam is actually students. Who's the ICP for you right now?
Students, international folks, and small business owners.
It's so robust that it's best for students so that they can teach them languages, maths, and whatever they want to learn, and they can actually, benefit from that. So
Have a personalized AI for themselves.
International folks are part of our ICP as well, because $5 is a lot different than 20 in certain parts of the world.
Right.
For sure.
Exactly.
The ability to switch between models is so important from a variety of reasons. They have different context window limitations. You have different sort of training data that really informs the way that they answer these questions. And you can tune these things up a little bit, but being able to switch to ones that are fit for purpose for what you're doing, and then on demand, you might have to troubleshoot, different servers that are down for different services, and being able to just keep things alive for your users. So important. So very, very cool. We do a similar thing as well. Like we're LLM agnostic. We work with small language models as well as any of the commercial or foundation models, and we can kind of switch in between them as needed. And to your point, Claude, I think is my favorite one to play with, although I want to take a run with the new Gemini model that was just released and kind of play with it as well. So we'll see. But yeah, good stuff, man.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
The next one on my screen is Dr. Yann.
Okay, so my background is academic. Got a PhD in theoretical astrophysics and did some work in applied mathematics, in games theory, optimization theory, network theory, and graph theory. I've worked as well as a DevOps before it was called DevOps, when I managed the largest email system in Europe. I did some work on silicon wafer metrology and programmed giant underwater robots. I've done cybersecurity as well. I'm definitely the jack of all trade, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And I'm running now my own consultancy with a couple of friends. And together we have over 100 years experience in software engineering. We've seen the things which work. We've seen the things that don't. We've pivoted from bad to working. And now we're trying to teach others how to avoid all the mistakes we've seen and that we've done, so they can get the software function to be smooth. We're obviously including AI in this because it's a new kid on the block, but as well, it can really enhance your software production. Yeah, that's the 10,000 feet overview.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yann. Really thankful that you could. Actually, when I was doing research on Dr. Yann, I was reading a lot that, oh God, so he knows this. And I was like, the first time I went on a call with him, I looked at, all right, that makes sense. The background guys. It's the books only. It's the library.
Yeah, it makes sense.
There are levels, and he's there at reading, and I have just a couple of books, and I'm just showing that off.
The engineering side, I was a DevOps before DevOps was coined, when I managed the largest email system in Europe.
So last but not the least, thank you, Andrew, for waiting for us. Please take the stage.
Hey, I'm Andrew Schwartz, and I have to say I feel just so boring in comparison. So I'm one of the founders of the company called Dodgeball, and we are an old school SaaS company for trust and safety. What we basically do is, for our customers, we help them aggregate together all sorts of interesting data about risks and bad behavior from their customers. And then we change dynamically the paths they send their customers through, depending upon the risks, and actually, for example, stop them from selling stuff to people who've stolen credit cards or whatever. But we also actually do a lot of these subtle changes of, for example, just ruling out people giving promos for a first-time purchase to someone who hasn't purchased. And all of these boundary cases that in a real e-commerce setting amount to actually huge amounts of money. And so basically, the goal for us is to save one of our customers 0.5% of gross. And, that doesn't sound like much, but 0.5% of gross at the level of Adele, you're talking real money.
Yeah. Right.
And that, I think, is actually why I'm a boring person. So most of my career has been really
Not really.
well, I mean,
You have a chef. Come on. You're not a boring person.
it's true. I do actually live on a sailboat, and I'm tucked with you from the lounge of the marina.
Nice.
And I was actually thinking about what, is a good story. And the story actually I kind of came up with is early in my career, I was teaching calculus. And so I have a math background. And I remember standing in front of 150 students and realizing that none of them wanted to be there and none of them were ever going to use it. And really, actually, none of them ever understood a word of what I was saying, even if they passed the exams. And I write about, what your life is like if you spend 20 years, 30 years of your life teaching people who are getting nothing from what you're doing. And at that point, I switched actually from being a math professor to programming.
Nice.
One of the things that I really took from that was the sense that quite often without thinking, people who do stuff with numbers, optimization systems, policy systems, just automatically make bad decisions for real people that have real impacts on their lives and can actually make them just miserable without really, quite often they're just wrong at this, but B, without really needing to do that and without any understanding. And so, personally, actually what makes me happy is knowing that the systems that we're working with are actually saving real people, real companies, actual money from criminal gangs and bad behavior. Because it's okay, sure, it's 0.5% off gross. Again, that's nice. But it's 0.5% thus that goes to criminal gangs.
That's right.
Not 0.5%. About half of that is major criminal gang in the world. If you can take 0.25% of gross online sales, A, give it back to the rightful owners, B, give it back to their real customers, and C, remove it from major crime brands. That's improving the world. That's me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, for background, actually, I do have to say, I have jumped around a lot between different boring industries. A while back, and actually, usually I go to where the other thing to mention is in 2005, some friends and I put together a company for analytics and optimization with the incredibly boring name of Actually, it originally was intentional analytics. And you can imagine the jokes that came off of that.
Right.
And it was very bad. You should never let founders name a company. But
Give us a joke. Give us a joke that came out of it.
are you intentionally anal?
Yes. Nice.
Exactly, I was thinking.
And it's funny because our initial idea was actually a hosted version of Apache Spark in 2005. So a little premature. We went off to VCs, and my partners were from McKinsey, and told them it wanted 15 million to make a startup to allow large enterprises to optimize. And they looked at us with wide open eyes and really, oh, that's lovely. Why do large companies want to optimize?
Okay.
Are you sure they weren't just worried about you taking their job?
Well, actually, I do have to say, yeah, they really, it just completely, they didn't understand. Why do large companies want to optimize anything?
That's on brand for McKinsey.
Yeah. My McKinsey co-founder, who, by the way, had a physics PhD, put his hand in his paws, and he didn't quite know, and just stuttered something about, save money.
Yeah. Why else?
But actually, there was one guy who did understand his question with, what job do you guys want in this? Because he wanted to take it over.
Nice.
That's me in my life.
Amazing.
Nice.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. Really appreciate all the introductions. All right. So we are in the open networking time now.
Hey, so John, when did you guys start? I'm kind of curious because so we literally tried to do, and I'm not saying your ideas at all, but we tried to do something in about the same space in 2003. And again, similarly to the VCs, the guys at DARPA were, of course, they were really focused on hardware and things like that.
Yeah.
But the idea of talking about different information and exchange between organizations was just something like, whoa, why are they even thinking about it?
Yeah, it's interesting because that's post 9/11, right? And the biggest issue with 9/11 was the fact that they weren't sharing information or had access to information, which opened the door to how do we share information? And there's been some novel attempts to try to aggregate intelligence into what I'd say are really messy data lakes at this point that the government is hosting. And, I think that really overlays my experience in the oil and gas industry, which is a multinational, highly bifurcated, disoriented, disaggregated systems company. At the end of the day, it's just a bunch of different independent business units that don't really communicate very well to each other. And, they roll them up in an accounting way, but that's about it. Being able to share lessons learned was a big part of my work at an oil company. When I worked for Chevron, it was about commercialization of technology and scalability of application. You can only get scale if you understand what other people are doing, and you can only get buy-in to try to build applications if you can get everybody on the same page about how we build our systems and how we deploy our infrastructure. And when we started this company, it's that's the problem we want to solve. We want to get information into a usable, multimodal, universal data model so that we can start to reason to and through it. And ultimately, we started with how do we put these puzzle pieces together, and semantic graphs were kind of the best way to do that. Running your own embeddings model that sits alongside these graphs, and then creating a pass through where you can do tactical recall into those embeddings models from the graph so that you can do problem specific solutioning, starts to really ramp up your ability to connect systems. And the government was like, that's interesting. We've been trying to solve that problem for a minute. Can you figure out how to inherit security dependencies and secure documents at rest and in transit and geofence and do different things? We were like, yeah, we can. We have a good partner. And that's how we got on a couple of very large programs of work with the DoD. But, to your point, Andrew, it's been a problem forever. It was highlighted in the 9/11 Commission report as like the reason why 9/11 happened. And, at the end of the day, we still have not solved that problem in enterprise and commercial context, and we certainly have not solved it in the government context. And we wanted to be somebody that could help people improve the way that they connect their systems and their ability to recall and understand the context of how these things are connected across their data landscapes. And so that's kind of how we got where we were, is fighting through that problem for so many years. I could show you guys an example of how we aggregated intelligence and then built applications on top of this stuff if you guys have like 3 minutes. But to your point, Yann,
Very much interested. 100%.
yeah. How do you package up information for people based on their persona, their perspective, and how information should be presented to them, and use that as a springboard for insights and intelligence? So let me show you guys. This is an example with public data for a company that we started to work for. They bought 8 different companies and they tried to aggregate 8 different companies of information, reconciling accounts, contracts, all of these things across the state of Texas and New Mexico. And one of the things they did when they bought these assets is realize they picked up a midstream business, which is sort of the middle, like how do we treat hydrocarbons? How do we handle production? How do we take it to market? That wasn't really part of their business before. And so they said, we need a couple of things. One, can you tell us what we bought? Because when we buy assets, we buy them on top line. We need to understand the micro considerations for each one of their assets and their contributions to the system so we can better understand how to operate these assets. And 2, can you tell us how to run these midstream businesses more effectively and optimize our disposal activities, reduce our total expense, and increase our profit? Those are 2 really nuanced, super huge questions. One is, can we tell them what they bought? And 2 is, can we answer that second question? So I'll start with that question, right? To build out a system that will answer that question, we have to aggregate a ton of cross-functional information. So we have the wells performance information, the midstream business unit information, the historical activities and scorecard for that business, the upcoming schedule for all the wells that are going to be completed and drilled, the production forecast, the well water production forecast, the historic water delivery, how efficient we were in the past, the permits that operate these assets, our fixed costs for the business, any commercial agreements that we have to share, and a bunch of other factors. We need all of those pieces of information to answer that question effectively. And so we built this tool at a high level to be a thought partner. How can we answer really strategic questions in context and start to get into the details on multiple factors that can analyze stuff at a strategic level from a very differentiated value chain? And this just gives a good idea of sort of the initial layer. Once we aggregate this intelligence, we can start to use this system as a thought partner for how we see information and how we can optimize our systems around that information. The other thing that we do is we integrate open source intelligence into how we answer some of these questions. So this is done for demonstration purposes. Whenever we pull these references up, this is data record level references for information that was recalled from this 6.5 million piece of this puzzle. These are the pieces of the puzzle that we're pulling out, and just kind of gives everybody a good understanding of where this information is originating from and the fact basis of it. But the other thing that we try to do is build this perspective modeler so we can take any single piece of information, any single asset, any single person, any single thing in this network and tell people within the context of their role, how that information is personalized to them. And so we can sort of on demand move from different perspectives in this system, which gives us an opportunity to personalize information really within the context of how people want to see it. So now as an economist or really an accountant, you can look in and say, okay, what's important to me about this information environment? You can do that from a drilling perspective as well. And this will take a couple of seconds to run, but we'll start to get into really technical details. This is all the same information base. It's just being parsed out on this persona basis so we can represent things. What that allows us to do is now start to personalize elements of data so we can build applications on top of it. So now we got data record level fluency. We understand everything. We can go in and start to build things like an invoice coding assistant, which will help us route and reconcile cost as it enters the system from 8 different companies, 8 different charts of accounts, 8 different contracts, a bunch of differentiated assets across this really, it's a multi-billion-dollar a year system of costs that's being reconciled. So we can do cool stuff whenever we load up invoices. This is all synthetic data, so no issues here. But we can start to say, hey, where are there likely things that can elevate your starting point? So from an analyst perspective, this workflow, because of how many different companies they had, is operating on that same information base that we just talked about before. But now we're personalizing to an application that has to do with invoice and accounting reconciliation. Now, this helps us really start to personalize the aspects of this application very, very quickly. We can start to spin up applications quickly and start to answer what was about a 20-day exercise. And we took it from 20 days down to 2 minutes. And the efficacy rates on what we're doing are now roughly 100%. On top of that, we started to build another application, which was how can we start to reduce our total cost exposure on a strategic and a tactical basis? Again, it's the same information that was in that first tab. We're just repackaging different elements of that information to build applications on top of it, which allow us to do things like see on demand, what does the production profile look like for any of these wells that we want to model around? What are our offtake opportunities? What are the library of costs associated to this? What are we doing with selective storage? And how do we want to optimize our system for surface storage or disposal? And we can start to run simulations that take us into individual asset levels over a given duration of time and get to a total cost objective where we can start to minimize our total cost exposure in practical application. And so we started to try to operationalize the information after we built out an information system, a harmonized and unified data model around applications that really fit within that context. So we're not trying to boil the ocean as much as distill the ocean information and start to use elements of that information pool for very targeted application. It's a little bit of a different play from a commercial perspective and what other people are doing. We also do logistics. We use LLMs for what they're good for. Again, like to Sam's earlier point, you can switch from different models, but we start to use these things because they can look at an entire value chain, an entire ecosystem of information at one time at scale to say, hey, we've asked this question and we get a good answer, but what are we missing potentially? Like you as somebody that can see the entire system and you understand the context of the system, tell me what are some better questions that we should be asking? What should we be paying attention to? And again, everything's cited and sorted down to the data record level. So we're trying to operationalize AI at scale for people that is trustworthy, transparent, and really easy to use. There are graphs running behind these systems, but we don't need to present graphs to people and confuse them any more than they already are. Let's present information in its native format in rows and columns, how they would normally see it in a spreadsheet, so that it's familiar and easy to use and easy to understand. That's really a core part of kind of how we've tried to build out our system and how we've tried to build solutions on top of that system. We're doing cybersecurity, contested logistics, all source intelligence, integrated intelligence, and then commercial applications as well. But it's like, how can you sort of build a system of thought around using these tools and these capabilities in really novel ways? And that's kind of where we got. I'm going to stop sharing, but stop talking. I don't want to consume too much airtime here, guys, but pretty cool stuff. We generated a lot of value for our customers so far, and there's a lot left on the table.
That's really cool, man. What stack do you use? What does this sit on from a back standpoint?
It's really on everything. I said this earlier, but like everything's Python. We're running everything sort of scripted in Python language wise, and we're running analytics through graph data science layers and then traditional machine learning and aggregated statistics and intelligence sort of approaches that you can find everywhere. But in terms of like the tech stack, it's super flexible. Like we're ported over to AWS, Google, Azure, like we can deploy sort of on-prem in an air-gapped environment with locally hosted models. We can deploy fully cloud hosted. Doesn't matter what data we use. It's fully multimodal. One caveat, we're not like processing video in real time, but we have the capacity to do it. We're just not doing it at the moment. It's flexible with any LLM. Again, so like we built it because of the requirements for DoD, which is it's got to be everything, everywhere, all at once. And so that's kind of how it's architected. And the stack is like super flexible depending on the environment we're in and the needs of the customer. We can kind of switch things up. So everything's kind of ported in every direction. I know it sounds silly, but contextually it was a real requirement that we had to meet.
Yeah, you're sitting right in the middle of all the FITSCOMs, basically pulling our essence, eating out like sensible information to both beat it. And
I do find it interesting that everyone is working in a mode where communication is important. And the reason I mention this is actually we're trying to actually get out of talking and out of communicating. So we actually are working to make it very easy for one person, even one person in a very large organization, to just go out, do something, and actually get it into practice. Yeah. And so actually maybe the example, trying to think like usually what I work on and what the companies I work on is direct actuation. The comparison to the well one is like coal plant optimization, where we actually built up a neural net modeling a coal plant and like change the dials.
Yes.
So no human being telling them what to do, but just straight out change the dials there. Or for one of our customers in one of the websites, change literally what options an actual live customer has.
Yeah.
And it does.
So we've done stuff similar as well. It's to your point, it's kind of the next evolution of this stuff. So I used to run the strat technology development portfolio for Chevron, and we do commercialization of technology. It's a huge part of my job. And one of the fundamental things, at least in the industry we're operating in, and you'll understand this super well, Andrew, because of your experience, the high reliability nature of this stuff, like the human in the loop being a fundamental part of how these things get deployed is really, really important. The optimization of making this somewhat automated in context is the next logical place to go. And the only reason we're hindered with the baggage that we are from a vision perspective is like, how can we make machines and people work better together so they can make better decisions together? Because once we can seed that trust in the system, you can start to automate things around it. And from my experience, that it's a good way to go about it. It's not the direct line you're talking about. And there's probably a good area to talk, right? Honestly.
Well, I must admit, like for DoD, I am just as happy there being humans in you.
Yeah. It's important.
The Terminator it's a good movie.
By the way, the guy who could not show up, Diego, actually making that.
Yeah, he's actually
making that. Since 2018, he's trying to build that so that he's trying to build
Skynet?
that can, more or less since 2018. And this guy is trying to build an AI that can actually develop, improve, and keep getting smarter and smarter and smarter, just with a moral standpoint, like moralistic. The AI has to be moralistic, that is it. Can keep learning endlessly like a human being. That is what he's building.
And it is not even working on LLMs.
I will say that his statement about moralistic is it's always context driven. And if it's about evolutionary theory and humans, our notion of moral doesn't include not stepping on the ants.
That's correct. Throughout history.
And like these for the AI that is to come, well, who are the ants?
Oh, God.
Yann, you're doing a lot of consulting work. I'm kind of curious, like how people are picking up just sort of AI applications today. Given your background in mathematics, there's a lot there. Curious what your thoughts are.
So a lot of people are picking up AI from the board because it's hype.
Yeah.
It's a magic AI fairy dust and it can do everything. And why do we need designers? The AI can design things for us. And why do we need artists? The AI can do art. And then they get burned very quickly, very badly. And it's a lot of money wasted. Whereas, hey, there are some really good applications to AI. And I think everyone here has some very good, your system is good, John. Sam's system is excellent because it provides that context, which is so much missing from AI. And in the software kind of production, when developers write code now enhanced by AI, that context is really, really important, because the same piece of code, which is completely safe in one environment, could be completely unsafe in another. And the AI won't know that. So it's up to the developer who knows enough to do it. But of course, now you can replace your developers with vibe coders, right?
I want to talk about vibe coding today for sure.
I'm sure the sarcasm has gone through there. But if you use AI correctly, in the right environment, and if you understand its limitations, it's a fantastic tool which can enhance your way of thinking about data, of displaying data, of understanding data, of presenting data. And I think I'm just parroting what John's been saying now, because it's exactly that. And from a fraud detection point of view as well, it's analyzing a lot of customers and picking those outliers. Now, one of my co-founders worked in the betting industry, and they do a lot of that analytic and seeing where are those outliers, those people who are suddenly betting on something which they really sounds a bit odd. Do they know something we don't know, or are they just dumb? And, sometimes they're just dumb. Sometimes, they actually know exactly what's going on underneath and are trying to game the system. So finding these things out, getting the AI to help you make decision is great, but that human in the loop is very important, especially with hallucinations. I mean, everybody's alluded to those. If you don't verify, I think it's a trust but verify approach. You need to make sure that the AI hasn't made something up, hasn't decided, oh, hey, this sounds fun. I mean, there's several lawyers which have got caught hallucinating cases to back their case. Yeah, to get back to my point is, a lot of people don't understand AI because it's quite an opaque barrier to entry. It's quite a high barrier to entry, and they believe the hype which some AI companies put out themselves. And the job security, and when they try to implement that, it doesn't quite go the way they think it goes.
I will say there is one thing, especially this would be vibe coding, actually. We're actually using vibe coding as a test of our customer documentation and the ability to use our SDKs. And what that means is actually, is our external documentation good enough to train a vibe coding system and set up a regression test of being able to successfully invoke them off a vibe coded system, purely automated. And if a vibe coded system can do that, then so can customers.
From an error standpoint and from a development standpoint, because you guys are all developers, right? I can sort of gauge that. From a development standpoint, if you were to develop an actual product, right, like with features and everything with an app, you mentioned, Andrew, that, you sort of improving the vibe coding with your software. Did you say that?
Well, we're not improving the vibe coding per se. We're using off-the-shelf vibe coders as a mechanism of testing that our system doesn't require any thought. And
they're improving the resources that the vibe coders can access, basically.
Exactly.
Like that.
Okay.
You need good API for these vibe coders, or else, like, if the APIs are not well structured and well formed and sensible, then the machine is not going to build a system that connects those APIs correctly. It's not going to error handle properly.
Exactly. And the reason specifically is because we want our customers to be able to just not have to think. It's just copy these 10 lines of code into their system. And the best test is, have systems that just follow the documentation with zero thought per se.
So
it's basically automation off of vibe coded. Go ahead, sorry, please.
Yeah. So that's really, really interesting, because DORA, the State of DevOps for 24 report, had a big chunk that there is a big correlation between good documentation and efficient software, which clearly it's not a causation, or maybe because it's good, you have good documentation.
Yeah.
Because, people understand that good software needs good documentation, you'd think.
Correlation, causation, probably.
Yeah. But the fact that you have that good documentation, that you have a system to test whether your documentation is good by giving it to something which is not smart, is great.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can spin something up pretty quick without good documentation, but as soon as you need to maintain it, so as you need to do any sort of regression testing, if you don't have good documentation, you're in big trouble. I mean, I deal with this all the time building integrations, and other developers will maybe move faster initially, but I'm going slow methodically, and I want to understand the business processes before I write a line of code. Like I will refuse to write any code without a visual diagram of what I'm trying to do, because too many times I've run into a situation where it's like, no, just build this, and it has to be like the machine needs to know it operates in ones and zeros. Absolutely.
I have seen code which was written by Russian mathematicians, which was then inherited by another bunch of mathematicians and a bit modified, which was then inherited by another bunch of people who didn't touch it, and they left, and I got my hands on this code, and they told me, can you improve it? And I looked at the code and says, I have no idea what it does. Because, every variable name is a letter and 2 numbers. I repeat that pattern randomly. We can just rewrite it, or we just leave it as is. Because, and of course, there was no documentation, no test, no nothing.
So I will say, like, my example is only really for our external stuff. And it's really handling objections from partners, because what our stuff needs ultimately, except in cases where it's purely automated to deploy, is unengineered to spend an hour on a customer side getting it deployed into a website. And so what we're trying, because we monitor their customers' interactions with their website. And so in a sense, us being able to vibe code it is proof that no, really, it will be literally an hour of one of your engineers. And then this all, follow the pattern because the vibe coder does. And by the way, eventually the goal is actually, well, our customer just uses the vibe coder and it does it for them. So, and like that progression of increasingly getting friction removed to do real work by automating away, I would say really in our case, it's really the boring stuff that nobody ever wants to look at. That just makes the world a better place.
Agreed. 100%. I think vibe coding will get there eventually. Like, we probably won't call it that then, but first of all, the LLMs need to not hallucinate. Second of all, every API needs to have good documentation, and then you've got to have your Cardinals windows to handle these code bases. And really, the LLM needs to create the documentation and be able to review it itself and review it with a human. So, like, while I'm vibe coding, I don't just want a YAML framework. Like, I want a YAML framework, and I want it to be described in a document that I can read and make sure I understand it. Because at some point in time, a human's got to put eyes on some parts of that code. Right now, with vibe, you've got to put eyes on every line because you can't trust it yet. But like, as all these components of it improve, it'll get better and better, and someone will come up with a way to build that documentation, identify the error point, and then put your eyes right there. And now you're vibe coding essentially, but you're still going to need to be like familiar with development to some degree. Like, these CEOs and like business people, MBAs who pick up, Replit or Cursor or whatever, like, they're fucked. Like, as soon as they get any amount of users, as soon as they get anything, I can't.
I've got a good quote for you. The I in LLM stands for intelligence.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
On the cybersecurity side, how do you ensure that your data doesn't get leaked?
So we personally don't like to deploy to any foundation models. If we're actually doing cybersecurity at scale, we're doing it hosted behind a firewall with a local model. We're not transacting cyber information with like ChatGPT foundation models that are commercialized. It's GovCloud has their own GPT instance that they deploy, and so we've done some testing on that. But they're starting to run localized models on the edge or on-prem that are very like narrow to that information environment, that server environment, that agency.
But that makes sense. Yeah, that's good. I was just looking at an article which said that 68% of companies who deployed AI had data leaked through AI. And I'm just going, what I was saying is 68% know they had data leaks.
Exactly. That's it, man. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, that was kind of our theory with building Hybo in the first place. My theory, I guess, was the LLM is really the product here for these companies, like for Anthropic, for OpenAI. Like, So yeah, ChatGPT is an afterthought, and it's built on this thread-based model. They don't want to give you too much context because it costs them more GPUs every time they give you more context, right? So like,
That's right.
the idea here is like, I don't think they're probably what's making them the most money is training these models and selling them and reselling them, right? And they're pushing people with CPIs, and so it's like the products are cool, but I think the evolution of the stack there is going to be now the LLM is going to become a base layer in the stack, and there's got to be a product on top of it. This is for consumer basis, but I'm sure there's analogies in the business corporate world, but from a consumer standpoint, like if I'm just a dumb person who doesn't understand AI, it's not really that helpful for me yet because it's just basically sucking my information in and not really and giving me some pretty generic ass responses in return. I want it to help me, learn and help me know how to use it and learn over time. And they're just not built. The architecture under the hood is not built for that with the trend base.
No, certainly not.
Right. Amazing. Since we have last 10 minutes left, let's give it to the rapid fires. We have a couple of questions to ask all of you. You can answer either yes or no. No descriptions, okay? This is the button. Let me ask you the first question. Do you secretly believe most AI ethic guidelines are just for public relations? Controversial question.
Currently, yes.
Currently, yes.
Currently, yes. There are some nice things that are happening, but right now it's a lot of lip service. There's probably some exceptions in John's world, but like a couple, but not many.
I will think
People don't know. No one understands this shit.
and it's to fix something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next question then is, do you think Chinese AI companies should be banned from Western markets?
No.
No.
He's using DeepSeek.
This is a bad question.
Yeah, he's saying.
He's using DeepSeek wrong.
The answer in my case
Is it depends, but yes, in some applications.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what you're really getting at there is the real next 20 years of balance of power is going to be probably based on machine learning and the ability to deploy at scale to provide the next attack. And Pearl Harbor of America is probably some version of an AI backdoor.
Yeah.
But I personally, what I would say is you can't avoid that by trying to stop China from developing, because it will. All that's happened so far is China has been forced to actually develop internal resources to make up for the ones that have been blocked. If you want to do something real, you actually just really need to make it easy for science to develop and grow in the US. And that includes actually getting the Chinese scientists to come here and not go back to China. Well, so much the better.
Yeah. Good luck. I like my perspective on this is really different than probably other people because of the folks that we work with. And the answer is it depends. But to Andrew's point, like, how do we learn and get better as a society associated with these tools? Is by leveraging what we understand as the best things that are sort of on the market, the best new approaches. Those are the things that drive innovation. Those are the things that create competitive balance. And for us, learning from these systems, while in certain instances not applying them, can be done in parallel. We can do commercial exploration of things. We can understand how we can build on top of these things, leverage these capabilities, these tools, these approaches more effectively without sort of introducing risks simultaneously. So that's why my answer is it depends. Certain applications, no, but in all applications, we should take a learning approach to innovation. And where there is innovation, we need to understand that because as a society, we're not going to get better.
I mean, we're talking about history.
Should we have TikTok in the US?
different question.
Yeah, but just looking at history, since we're talking, there's a period in Japanese history where they isolated themselves completely, the Tokugawa shogunate.
Yep.
And there was a great works in the arts and poetry and literature in Japan. But when Komodo Perry turned up, things didn't quite work out very well for the Japanese. Part of the reaction to what happened with the Meiji Restoration, we ended up with a very imperial Japan during World War II. So those periods of isolationism and massive pull from technology from elsewhere do end up being quite dangerous. So a more paused and thought approach is probably needed as well. So I agree with John. Some cases, you don't want things.
Yeah.
other cases, it's probably fine. I stopped using my baby monitor when it started to ask for my contact details and my chats and phones. And I wait, I'm not sure that's something I'm willing to share with China.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I mean, from a social evolutionary standpoint, like we've evolved by creating bigger and bigger communities, right? And like, but the thing here, balance that with driving competition. We have to have borders and boundaries to create competition. Who am I competing against? Like right now, we've got this global market, but if I'm competing against the whole world and there's no country boundaries, we're not ready to depart from our country boundaries yet. Probably will be eventually, but we're just not there yet. And it's the only thing that keeps us competitive right now, you know? And so like, it's like, you've got to keep getting bigger and bigger communities, but also, you know, retain the competition between the subgroups in those communities, however you do that. Yeah. We just haven't, like, you know, we still need a DOD. Like we, unfortunately, now, like, would be cool if everybody could get along and we still had enough incentive to compete with one another, build better and better things, but we're just not there.
This is such a fascinating question. I know we're supposed to answer yes or no, but I think we could do an entire podcast on this question alone.
I got to go pick up my dog. So I'm very, all right. This was lovely. That was really cool. It was great to meet all of the guys.
Thank
That
you.
was.
Sam, definitely hit me up.
I will. I'll hit you up, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Really appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks.
I like Askush to pass my details to everybody as well.
Same here. Yeah.
Keep in touch.
Thank you very much, guys. Actually, I still have the three of you. I have one more question, actually.
Sure.
If you guys are okay with that. Would you ever use your own AI to make the decision about firing your employees?
No.
No.
Never.
Okay. I was actually going to take that decision. So use AI to figure out if I should. What do you think about that?
You can use AI to figure out how to rank employees because it's really good at reading lists, reading metrics and interpreting them and trying to rank people based on their performance. Like, it's a good way to do that. But as a leader of a company, like, one, you need to know your people. You need to know their strengths and weaknesses. You need to understand the things that you're putting them on are the things that they're good at. And if they're not, you know, and you're assigning them to things that they're not, there might be a learning curve associated to that. You know, like as a leader, you need to know your people. You need to know what you're asking them to do. And a system's not going to be able to ascertain that, I think, as well as they would need to, at least have me give over that sort of decision authority to AI.
I remember one of my first manager when I just started work said something which stayed with me, which is if the team succeed, all the credit goes to the team. If the team fails, it's my fault.
Yeah.
Yep.
My manager said the same thing, actually.
But if your employees are not doing well as a leader, it kind of is your fault.
Yeah.
And you need to figure out how to make them do. Generally, it's private life, something which you can't really impact, but you should try. And getting a machine to do it for you, no, absolutely not.
I do think that there's often in business a belief that firing is the important thing. And I think that's actually entirely inside out. My goal is never to fire anyone. And, you know, sometimes I've had to do aggressive things, but it's actually the exception. And really, my goal is to be as aggressive as I have to be in someone's first 3 months. But if somebody has lasted for first 3 months, sometimes you have to cut people because they're bad for the team.
Right.
If somebody's being successful past roughly 3 months, then my goal is to make them as successful as possible, and they've already been filtered out against the big failures.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, like, I don't want to have borderline people who I'm trying to improve. I want really strong people who, with a bit of help, will get stronger. But I will also say that I could personally never look someone in the eye and saying, and maybe on television, actually.
I'm firing you because I've asked ChatGPT. Yeah. You know what? I was talking to ChatGPT. He doesn't like you very much. So you're out.
I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm going to have to let you go.
So, all right. That is it. Really appreciate everybody. Really, really do. It was an amazing session. I hope every one of you enjoyed it, talking to each other. I'm probably going
It
to
was fun.
name this podcast by the end of it. You know, I'll just say that, try and figure out what they're talking about. So, yeah.
Everything.
Or I'll say, you know, just for tech nerds, so that you can understand it. I think it was amazing. It was very industry specific. I believe people who will watch this will thoroughly enjoy it. And I really, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.